I'm not going anywhere. Boris Johnson's message to his critics.
Do you really want a third term?
What I want to do is continue to deliver as much as we possibly can
For another decade?
For the British people.
Speaking to ITV News at the G7 summit, the PM also denied this week's double by-election defeat was a source of personal shame. Also tonight. Under fire again, Russian missiles rained down on Ukraine's capital in a series of fresh attacks. Reports Prince Charles accepted €1 million in cash from the former Qatari Prime Minister. Clarence House says it was a charity donation and... So Paul McCartney rocks Glastonbury with a little help from his friends.
This is ITV News with Lucrezia Millerini.
Good evening. Boris Johnson says he wants to continue as Prime Minister, brushing off the suggestion that his party's disastrous defeats in 2 by-elections last week were a source of personal shame. The PM, who was in Germany for a meeting of G7 leaders, is facing criticism from Tory MPs back home and a potential fresh effort to unseat him. But when questioned by our political correspondent Romilly Weeks in an exclusive interview about reports he's looking to stay in Downing Street for another decade, he didn't deny them.
Here we go.
The Prime Minister arrived in Germany early this morning with his wife to the sort of red carpet reception at this G7 summit that he's certainly not getting back home. And he had a message to critics both inside and outside his party. He's not going anywhere.
Do you really want a third term?
What I want to do is continue to deliver as much as we possibly can
For another decade?
For the British people. And I'm focused on the immediate job in hand.
As for who's to blame for voters' loss of faith that led to the 2 crushing by-election defeats,
What they say is they no longer trust you. Isn't that a source of personal shame?
No, because I think that actually when you look at what this government has done, it is quite exceptional. And look, I understand that people are going to want to criticise me, attack me for all sorts of reasons. Some of them good, some of them less good. I think that actually when you look at what this government has done, it is pretty remarkable.
but with the country facing a summer of strikes, he could offer little solace for public sector workers looking at pay rises well below inflation.
Should teachers, doctors and nurses also be looking at pay rises of only 3%?
I'm not going to give a comment on each offer or suggestion that the peer review bodies may make, but what I would say to you is that at a time when you've got inflationary pressures in an economy, there's no point in having pay rises that just cause further price rises.
You say you understand the cost of living pressures people are facing. There are reports that you wanted to build a £150,000 treehouse for your son at Chequers. Did you?
There is no such structure. All sorts of allegations are made about...
but did you want to build one?
All sorts of allegations are made about my family and my private life. And you know, Romilly, in 25 years, or however long it is now, I've never talked about that. What I will talk about is the jobs growth.
You won't deny that you want to build one.
If you look at the infrastructure that I have built, then I'm very, very proud of it.
He was far more at home talking about Ukraine, including this banter about taking his jacket off to show he's tougher than Putin. His rather more serious aim of this summit is to make sure fellow G7 leaders stay united in support of President Zelensky. No easy proposition itself, and one that's not going to quieten the sound of knives sharpening for him back home.
Oh, Romilly, Boris Johnson there seemed bullish both about Ukraine and his personal political position. But how will that have gone down with MPs here?
amazingly bullish, Lucrezia, given his personal predicament, but raising the prospect of a third term, as far as his MPs go, might not be the cleverest strategy given the electoral drubbing that he's just received. Plenty of his MPs are wondering when or whether to strike, and his notable lack of contrition may well just push them over the edge. As far as Ukraine goes, he has a genuine zeal to back President Zelensky to the hilt. What he's trying to persuade his fellow leaders here over the next few days is for a big increase, a big push of support for Ukraine to try and get President Zelensky to a position where in any future negotiations with Russia, he's not approaching it on its knees.
All right, Romilly, thank you. Well, just as G7 leaders were arriving in Germany, the relative safety of Ukraine's capital was shattered as a series of rockets struck, hitting 2 residential buildings. Ukrainian officials say as many as 14 missiles were fired by Russia, killing at least 1 person and injuring many more. From Kiev, John Ray reports.
For the best part of 3 weeks, Ukraine's capital has been spared the worst of Russian aggression. But today a clutch of cruise missiles flew towards Kiev. One destroyed a 9-floor apartment building. It was early morning. Many sleeping residents were trapped inside. Rescue workers toiled for hours to dig out survivors, including this 7-year-old girl, whose mother, a Russian citizen, was among the injured, while her father lay dead under the rubble. Her grandmother's anguish was all too raw. This neighbour told us she heard 3 explosions and then a 4th, almost deafening.
The whole house was shaking. My child woke up and wouldn't go back to sleep.
I mean, you must have been terrified.
Very scared. I speak of it now and I get chills.
The attack took place ahead of G7 and NATO summits, tests of their commitment to Ukraine. The timing perhaps no coincidence.
If these strikes were designed to send a message from President Putin to Ukraine and its Western allies, then the meaning could not be clearer. That he is determined to prosecute his war, whatever the cost.
This woman had just escaped to Kiev from Severodonetsk, the trauma of conflict tracking her from the eastern city that has now fallen to Russia, whose defense minister handed out medals to his troops. He told them they had glorious deeds ahead for the fatherland. Ukraine's president will address both summits to make the case for more military aid.
No Russian missiles, no strikes can break the spirit of Ukrainians. And each of their missiles is an argument in negotiations with our partners.
It is not clear whether the attack on Kiev marks the start of a new, sustained air offensive, but it is a reminder of the reach of Moscow's missiles in a war that continues to test the endurance of all sides. John Ray, ITV News, Kiev.
At least 22 young people have been found dead in a nightclub in South Africa. Families have gathered outside waiting for news. Authorities say it is unclear how the victims, the youngest, aged 18, died. An SNP MP has resigned from the party amid a police investigation into sexual harassment allegations. Patrick Grady says he plans to sit as an independent. Police are investigating an incident which took place at a London pub in 2016. And 16 people attempting to row around Great Britain have had to be rescued. 3 vessels hit bad weather in the Irish Sea. The Prince of Wales is facing questions over payments he received from a former Qatari Prime Minister. It's reported some of the money, as much as €1 million in cash, was handed over in a suitcase. Well, Clarence House insists all correct processes were followed and that the money was paid to one of Prince Charles's charities. With the details, here's Geraint Vincent.
The Prince of Wales was carrying out a head of state's duties this week, representing the Queen at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Rwanda. But it was a series of meetings he had with a former Prime Minister of Qatar between 2011 and 2015, which are under scrutiny this weekend. The Sunday Times says that Charles personally accepted a total of €3 million in cash from Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim, money intended for the Prince's charitable fund.
The newspaper claims that the cash was handed over here at the Prince's London home, on one occasion in a holdall and on another in carrier bags from the department store Fortnum & Mason. Clarence House says that these charitable donations were dealt with entirely properly.
A statement from Clarence House said charitable donations received from Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim were passed immediately to one of the Prince's charities, who carried out the appropriate governance and have assured us that all the correct processes were followed. These latest claims come after the resignation of Michael Fawcett, who was the chief executive of another of Charles's charities, the Prince's Foundation, which is being investigated by police over allegations that a Saudi donor was offered an honour in return for cash. Clarence House has said that Charles had no knowledge of any such offers being made, but at a time when he is taking on more of his mother's responsibilities, questions about how his charities have been managed persist. Geraint Vincent, ITV News.
Cricket now, and England are on course for a 3-0 series whitewash against New Zealand. The reigning world champions set the home side 296 to win. Tonight, with 1 day to play, they sit on 183 for 2. Chris Scudder was watching.
The fern on the helmet looked more like a thorn in England's side. Blundell and Mitchell both got to 50 in their second innings.
Another 50.
And when England thought they had Blundell out LBW, their hopes were dashed by video review.
Wicket missing.
But then everything changed. Mitchell was trapped leg before.
Gone as well.
Then it was a case of leg behind. Sam Billings catching the ball between his thighs for the most unusual of dismissals.
And Jack Leach knew straight away.
Jack Leach did the rest, and 10 wickets in the match for the first time in his Test career. Chasing 296, England made a terrible start. Alex Lees run out cheaply.
Gone!
Zach Crawley fell for 25 when looking well set. But Ollie Pope and Joe Root both cruised past half-centuries, and England look on course for a series clean sweep. Chris Scudder, ITV News.
And finally, as Glastonbury draws to a close later tonight, it was yesterday's headline act that had everybody talking. So Paul McCartney became the festival's oldest headliner, the 80-year-old wowing the crowds for 3 hours with an extensive back catalogue of hits and, as Vincent McAviney reports, with a little help from some legendary friends.
2 years later than planned due to the pandemic, Paul McCartney strode onto the iconic Glastonbury Pyramid stage to headline the 50th anniversary of the festival. The oldest ever headliner at 80, there was no sign of the former Beatle slowing down as he turned back the clock on decades of hits.
We've got some old songs for you, we've got some new songs and some in-betweeners. Get back to where you once belonged.
Not that he needed to share the stage, but some friends helped him out.
Now I've got a little surprise here for you.
First, Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters. Then the boss, Bruce Springsteen. Before finally, with some technical wizardry, his former songwriting partner.
Everybody had a hard year. Everybody had a good time.
With McCartney still ringing in their ears, festival goers couldn't get over the performance.
Being part of that crowd when there was thousands of people there, everyone was singing like Hey Jude, Let It Be, and then he brought out like these amazing acts as well.
Somebody half his age couldn't have done what he did. It was absolutely brilliant.
McCartney once sang about a quiet retired life when he was 64.
So live and let die.
The octogenarian shows no signs still of hanging up his guitar. Vincent McAviney, ITV News.
What an amazing amazing night that must have been. And that is it for now. I'm back with the late news at 10. Until then, enjoy your evening. Bye-bye.
First thing today will be lovely and warm, and by breakfast time, it could be on the sunny side. Heinz tomato